I'm so lonely. Sorry, can I please come home? Won't you phone me? Sorry, can I please come home? I miss the feel of the tender touch. Sorry, can I please come home? I miss you, baby, cause it's much too much. Sorry, can I please come home? Sorry, can I please come home? I just wanna wake up to you. Sorry, can I please come home? The sex song got me feeling blue. Sorry, can I please come home? Between the sheets, my only thrill. Sorry, can I please come home? But who picks up the hotel bill? Sorry, can I please come home? Sorry, can I please come home? Well, I didn't want an alibi, but you can't be talking me. I don't mind. Well, I'm so lonely. Sorry, can I please come home? Sorry, can I please come home? Right now. Well, I didn't want an alibi, but you can't be talking me. I don't mind. I'm so lonely. Sorry, can I please come home? Won't you phone me? Sorry, can I please come home? I miss the feel of your tender touch. Sorry, can I please come home? I miss you, baby, cause it's much too much. Sorry, can I please come home? Sorry, can I please come home? Sorry, can I please come home? I'm sorry, can I please come home? Oh, you got me so lonely. 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 Lonely, 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 lonely. Sorry, can I please come home? Lonely, 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 lonely. Sorry, can I please come home? Well, I'm sorry, can I please come home? 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 wanna go through. I said I like a deadly chorus. I think it's on now. Let me scream. I gotta scream now. Let me have a screaming, man. Yeah, I'm screaming now. to get to the left. Stop, I say, traveling in the Grand Carnival. Not too much space to move. Traveling in the Grand Carnival. Moving to the road. Yeah, close to the destination. Want to move around. Time to waste. Yeah, it's getting high. Now get it's time to get in the mood. Don't so far from the place now. Everybody, get loose. Traveling in the Grand Carnival. Not too much space to move. Traveling in the Grand Carnival. Dojo. Traveling in the Grand Carnival. Not too much space to move. I said traveling in the Grand Carnival. Moving to that dojo groove. I said traveling in the Grand Carnival. Not too much space to move. I said I'm traveling in the Grand Carnival. Moving to that dojo. You got me crying when I'm alone. You got me lying in my own home. Oh, that is time. Let's leave you here alone. You trouble me. Got me waiting by the ringing telephone. You got me watching for you to come down my road. But you know that it's time to just leave you here alone. You trouble me. You trouble me. You trouble me. You trouble me. You trouble, you trouble me. Oh, it's time to just let me alone. You trouble me. Will be so. Will be so.
Capítulo 1 del Evangelio del Reggae según Peter Parker. No intenten hacerlo en casa, pues puede ser peligroso. Este hit está buscado por especialistas. Haced lo que os digo y nadie saldrá herido. se ponen sus zapatos de bailar y salen a la pista. Las suelas echan chispas, con los pies en órbita no puedes parar. No, 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 no lo intentes. Es como un tren sin frenos. Este es el ritmo que los chicos quieren bailar, año tras año tras año. Yo sé muy bien lo que vas a pensar, que no has escuchado nunca nada igual. Watch me now, baby. Good guys. In a war on landing, in a tuk-tuk roll. Si la langosta salta, Teddy siempre tiene un as en la manga. Una vez más ganamos la partida, salvamos a la chica y nos quedamos con el premio. Desde New Orleans, Venus, Marte y New York City. In a tuk-tuk roll, in a war on landing. In a tuk-tuk roll, in a war on landing. In a tuk-tuk roll, in a war on landing.
Excuse me. Good evening. Good evening. My name is Marcus Mabry, and I'm the president of the Overseas Press Club of America. Thank you. I would like to thank the OPC staff and our executive director, Patricia Krantz, for making this incredible evening happen. Thank you, Patty. There are few things more humbling than being the president of the OPC. To be president of such a club is to be eternally in awe. For our members are the people who brave risk, often mortal, from mortars to disease, to merely report the world to the world. It is that simple and that complicated. And to be president of the OPC is to know what sacrifices the members of our tribe make to accomplish that goal, and how extraordinarily well they succeed. Tonight we honor those women and men who have succeeded. But the OPC is more than just this night of seeing international photojournalists in tuxedos. It is also programs that bring the best of what we do as foreign correspondents and editors to wider audiences year-round. It is training sessions for aspiring young journalists in safety and encryption. And it is collaboration for the first time in history with our peer organizations and media companies to create a set of safety standards for freelance journalists in conflict zones. If you believe in our mission of serving the people who cover the world, then I ask you to fill out one of those cards on your table tonight. Please. Tonight, I am further honored that our keynote speaker knows all about courage under fire. Dean Baquet is a historic figure, the first African American to be editor of one of the most influential news organizations in the world. Yet, strikingly, that is not what Dean Baquet is most known for among journalists. Dean is best known for his courage under fire, before bosses who demanded too much in newsroom cuts, before governments that wanted the press to toe their line, or worse, before an almost unprecedented technological and business revolution in our industry. Exactly 2 weeks before his one-year anniversary as executive editor of the New York Times, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome my boss, Dean Baquet.
In fact, he only said all those nice things because I am his boss. Thank you, Marcus, and thank you. Somehow, while we were all debating the future of print and wringing our hands over our business model, a writer for the Virginia Quarterly went to Bangladesh and reconstructed in novelistic detail the building collapse that killed more than 1,000 garment workers. Somehow, while panels were being assembled at journalism schools across the country to discuss whether ours was a profession worth going into, a young journalist named Matthew Akins, who lives in Kabul, published on Medium a hair-raising account of the first responders in Aleppo who were, quote, attendant to the city's trauma. And somehow, while we were all debating platforms, videographers were descending on Ebola-stricken Liberia, bringing back stories that forced the West to notice. I should say that I have no idea whether any of these stories won Overseas Press Club awards. But I mention them to say that great international reporting is breaking out all over the world, and maybe it's time for us to boast about it more widely. I know, big news organizations are cutting their foreign staffs, and some of them are even in peril. But you know what? It's time for us to take our story back from the hand-wringers, and some of the journalism professors who seem to make a living telling us what we're doing wrong. I hope they're all here. We need to scream about the fact that there is huge and ambitious work being done in the old places like the New York Times, the Los Angeles Times, and the Washington Post, and then the new places like BuzzFeed and Vice. We can debate the form, we can debate who does it well and who does it best, but let's not miss the point that it's being done more creatively, more powerfully than ever before. That the same technology that imperils us has also made us better. That we have tools and methods and giant, enormous new audiences. Not long ago, the Times and other traditional news organizations reluctantly started using video. Mainly because we were told, that's that thing with the moving pictures. Mainly because we were told it might help us make money. Now it is part of our lives, part of our storytelling. I cannot imagine telling the story of Ebola without the powerful video of a young man writhing on the ground outside a clinic in Monrovia, pleading desperately to be let in. Or the video of the ambulance driver whose job it is to drive around and pick up the corpses no one else will touch. Last month, a young videographer burst into my office, strapped a 3D device on my head, flipped a switch on the device and said, "Have a look at the future." He began playing a video through the lenses of a Syrian refugee camp. But I wasn't watching it. I was standing in the middle of it. A group of little girls in ragtag clothing were running around me, kicking a soccer ball. Reflexively, my leg kicked at the ball. If that's the future of journalism, of storytelling, please, I want in. Even as we debate our future, let's extol the necessity of the institutions, old and new, whose zeal for public service compel them to chase the biggest stories, even if they risk losing money, going into war-ravaged areas, even going to jail to do it. And that's not about print, that's not about television, it's about journalism, wherever the words land, on a page or on a screen. The issues confronting the world are big, and our ambitions should be at least as big. A month ago, I spoke to the Army War College. I love the fact that there's an Army War College. It was a class of future generals and a few foreigners who I have no doubt will become future despots. And what scared them the most when we had a private conversation was the same thing that scares me. Warfare that is now conducted in so much secrecy that it is hard and dangerous to cover. The United States is engaged in more clandestine warfare than at any time in history, a dramatic shift fueled by a rise in technology. The new president of Afghanistan came to the Times recently, and I asked him whether the United States was making drone strikes in his country. He paused and he said remarkably that he didn't know. There is no full accounting of how many civilians have been killed in Afghanistan or Pakistan through drone strikes or night raids in which American or Afghan special forces go in the dead of night to capture suspected insurgents. There is no full, honest accounting yet of where the United States operates drone bases, or how many strikes it makes a year, a month, or a day. Since September 11th, American military policy has taken place largely in secret. And the only institutions big enough, powerful enough, and unselfish enough to investigate is the press. There may be no time in our history when the absolute necessity of what we do is more powerfully evident. Yet our insecurity is too much on display. So let's stop. Let's go back to being arrogant, please. Just a little, not all the way, but just a little. Let's not stop acknowledging our past mistakes and learning from them, but let's go back to reminding people that we are necessary and vital, that we may change and we will change, but that we're big, rambunctious, necessary, and we're not going anywhere. Take that messages to college campuses, take that messages to government offices, and thank you.
Dean, thank you very much. We will be right back as soon as the waitstaff has cleared your entrees. Thank you.
I feel so good today. I feel so good today. I wake up in the morning light, gloom is shining over me, and I can't get out of bed, cause all the things are in my head, they hang over me, they hang over me. When people say there's nothing wrong, lions key within their minds, but you don't have to look far from where you are to where you are. Just take a look and see what you can find. Oh yeah. Sun is shining, but it's self-blinding. We keep on smiling, and it's not surprising. All the sweetest things turn out so mentally. We end up being not so good and lost anomaly. I feel so good today. Oh, yeah, I feel so good today. Oh, I feel so good today. I feel so good today. I feel so good today. I am so hoping that things will change, and my mind will let me be. Cause I know that late at night, all the demons through my plot, and they will know for me. Oh, they take over me. Oh, yeah. Sun is shining, but it's self-blinding. We keep on smiling, and it's not surprising. All the sweetest things turn out so mentally. They end up being not so good and lost anomaly. I feel so good today. Oh, what about tomorrow? I feel so good today. But what about tomorrow? Sun is shining, keep on smiling. 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 Let's keep it tight and out of sight. Let's keep it tight and out of sight. Let's keep it tight and out of sight. Yeah. Let's keep it tight and out of sight. Let's keep it tight. Let's keep it tight. Let's keep it tight and out of sight. Let's keep it tight. Let's keep it tight. Let's keep it tight and out of sight. Let's keep it tight. Let's keep it tight. Let's keep it tight.
Confronted by majority, weight of others trying to make you see, but their truth is not for real. Just hold on to your idea.
Hello, please take your seats. Ladies and gentlemen, and reporters, please take your seats. To lead us in our festivities tonight, we are honored to have one of the most respected members of our tribe. Deb Ramos covers the Middle East for NPR. Her reports can be heard on Morning Edition, All Things Considered, and Weekend Edition. She has reported from throughout the region, including almost every state in Central Asia. She is one of the most knowledgeable journalists covering the Syrian conflict today. And as I said, ladies and gentlemen, she is one of us. Please welcome Deb Ramos.
Thank you so much. It's so nice to be here and to actually meet my Twitter feed in person. I even get to hug some of them. We have a long night, lots of awards, lots of great work over the past year. One housekeeping item. For each award, I'll announce the names of citation winners at the same time as the award winners so we can honor them with applause as the winners are coming up. So only the award winners will come up to the stage. So thank you for that. And remember, award winners, keep it short because we have some wine at the table, but there is an end to this. Let's begin with the newspapers. Our first award tonight is the Hal Bowl Award. It's sponsored by Norm Pearlstein in honor of his friend Jerry Flint, and it's for best newspaper, news service, or online reporting from abroad, and it's awarded to Adam Nossiter, Nori Anashi, Helene Cooper, Sherry Fink, and the New York Times staff. In a series of powerful stories, the Times correspondents captured the crisis in all of its dimensions. Congratulations to the team for also winning a Polk Award and a Pulitzer Prize for their Ebola coverage. I'm also going to mention the citation winner, and that goes to Richard Morassi and Dan Bartoletti of the Los Angeles Times for Product of Mexico. Congratulations. Let's give it to the first one.
Thank you very much, Deborah. I think it's really cool that me and Sherry and Pam are, out of all the many, many people at the New York Times who contributed to the Ebola coverage, the 3 women are up here. So I've been reading a lot about Hal Boyle today, and it turns out he's this AP correspondent who got the closest to the fight in World War II, the closest to the front. And I thought that was really interesting because it reminded me of something that happened in Liberia back in October when I was there working on the Ebola stories. I was coming back to Monrovia in the middle of the night from Bonga, where I'd been reporting, and a security guard who was with the president, who I was working on a story about, jumped in the car with me because he didn't want me to drive back by myself at night. And at the darkest part of the road, the headlights picked up a body on the side of the road, and he yelled, "Stop," and stopped, and he jumped out of the car, he took his gun, and he ran over to the body behind me now. And I was freaked out because I have a lot of memories of the Liberian Civil War. I was imagining magic soldiers jumping out of the bush. And he finally came back and he said he wasn't dead. The body wasn't dead. He was drunk. He had just run into the bush after Vase, the security guard, got there. And I yelled at him. I was like, "Are you crazy? He could have had Ebola. It could have been an ambush." And he looked at me for a really long time. And then finally he said, "You don't leave people on the side of the road to die." And I thought that was really apt for looking around this room for everybody here, because that's what we do as journalists. We don't leave people on the side of the road to die. We bear witness to that, which is why on behalf of Adam and Nori and Ben and everybody at the New York Times, including Greg, we thank you so much for this incredible award.
Number 2 is the Bob Considine Award. It's for Best Newspaper, News Service, or Online Interpretation of International Affairs, and it's sponsored by Bill Holstein and Rita Seville. It's awarded to Sergei Looko and Carol Williams of the LA Times for coverage of the Ukrainian conflict that stood out from the rest for its guts, credibility, and originality. Carol is no stranger to this stage. This is her 5th OPC Award. Sergei, who lives in Moscow, came to New York from Texas, where he's on leave. And so congratulations to the team. A citation goes to Anthony Fayola, Greg Miller, Kevin Sullivan, Suad McKennett of the Washington Post for Foreign Fighters.
Hi, I know we're supposed to tell an amusing anecdote, but there really aren't too many of those from Russia and Ukraine these days. So I'm just going to be a buzzkill and say I don't think any story more than Ukraine and what's happened there in the last year and a half, with 6,000 dead and 1.5 million people displaced, and cities destroyed for absolutely no reason, demonstrates more vividly the importance of a free press. This war would not be happening now if the media in Russia were not fed a steady stream of, distorted, provocative documentaries and news reports that, have poisoned the minds of the people in Russia. They believe they're the victims and that what they're doing in Ukraine is, perfectly justified. This story has demonstrated how Russia has this enduring power to surprise us. We think that they're in a post-Soviet, post-communist reconstruction phase, and then the Cold War comes riveting back. I would be exaggerating if I said Sergei and I had a strategy for how we were covering this. I think it mostly broke down to me doing the sort of geopolitical analysis and Sergei doing the riveting stories that everybody wanted to read. So, and I think, it's all the more impressive what he did from the front lines of Ukraine when you know that he had just lost his wife to cancer 2 months earlier. And I think nobody would be more proud of your achievements than Nastya. And I think we are devoting this award to her.
We're going to move on to photography, and we have the Robert Capa Gold Medal for Exceptional Courage and Enterprise, sponsored by Time Magazine. It's awarded to Marcus Bleasdale for capturing the brutal violence in the Central African Republic. Marcus was on assignment for Human Rights Watch, Foreign Policy, and National Geographic magazine. Last year, he took to this podium to accept an award for his pictures of a dramatically different subject, Viking whalers. When he was notified he won the Capa Award this year, Marcus said, "Wild horses couldn't keep me away, so we have taken away the wild horses." He's here from his home in Oslo. Marcus Bleasdale. And I'm going to read the citation. Goes to John Moore of Getty Images for the Ebola crisis in Monrovia, Liberia.
Wow. How humbling is it to stand here with this award with the name Robert Capa on it? Very humbling indeed, and also incredibly humbling to look at the names that have won this award before me. I can thank you very much from the bottom of my heart for awarding this. It's also, I think, incredible that this is the first time this award has been given to a photographer that's been working for an NGO. This is a huge honor for me and Peter Buchert, my colleague, and Human Rights Watch, who I was working for. It would not have happened also without the huge support of Betsy Carell, whose vision had saved many lives. But I would like to accept this award, remembering Camille Lepage, who was killed in the Central African Republic on May 2014. It's in my view that photographers can and should use their skills to engage and educate. That can, from time to time, involve challenging governments or multinational organizations about their work or policies, and in my world, that can only be a good thing. There are times when working with Human Rights Watch, we can say that this partnership was effective. We encouraged French peacekeepers to come and restore a level of order. That was one of the great success moments. Getting the UN to agree to send 10,300 troops into the Central African Republic was another. But there are also moments when it proved ineffective. Many Muslims died in enclaves like Yaloke and Buda, despite us making very public and very targeted appeals to try to save those lives. The best investigative journalism begins to try to expose and inform, educate, and much of the time it results in an opinion, my opinion. And as a photographer, when I have an opinion, I try to work with advocacy groups to try and express that through media. And having an opinion does not diminish the power of that work, but it enhances it. In my view, partnering with advocacy groups only extends the reach and power of our work, and it's essential in making our photography more effective. John Steinbeck said in 1954 about Robert Capa, that Capa had proved beyond all doubt that the camera need not be a cold mechanical device. Like the pen, it is it is as good as the man who uses it, and it can be an extension of the mind and heart. Thank you very much.
The Olivier Ribot Award for Best Photography in Magazines or Books has been won by Jerome Cecchini of Magnum Photos for his elegiac images in Time magazine and the Standard of the wreckage of a Malaysian airline shot down over eastern Ukraine. And he's here from Paris.
Good evening. On July 17, I was in a mining village near Donetsk. It was a quiet and boring day. I arrived at the crash site at 7 p.m. and the scene was unreal, strangely quiet, but the silence was loud. Bodies were scattered around, and the saddest part was to see the luggages of the passengers, the duty-free shopping, clothes, and the children's book. A woman wanted me to go in her house. When we arrived at the doorstep, she held my hand, and she started to cry. A body had gone through the roof of her house and landed into her son's bedroom. She said, "When we heard the impact noises around us, we thought it was a shelling, and we ran to hide down in the basement. After a while, we realized it was the sound of the corpse falling from the sky." She said, "It rained the dead." It was one of the most terrible experiences in my photographer life, but it strengthened me to show the world as it is, not as we would like it to be. Thank you for your attention.
The John Faber Award for Best Photography in Newspapers or News Service goes to Bülent Kiliç of Agence France Presse for his inspired visual reporting under difficult conditions during Ukraine's Euromaidan revolution. Bülent can't be here in person to accept his award, but we hope he's watching from his home in Istanbul. And a citation goes to Oliver Weeken of the European Press Photo Agency for 2014 war between Israel and Hamas. Round of applause. Thank you. Okay. The Feature Photography Award is sponsored by SEMA. Ruben of the Business and Entertainment has been won by Rodrigo Ahid of the Associated Press for his intimate and straightforward photos of the threat looming for 200,000 wildcat gold miners in Peru. Here from Peru is Robert Abid.
Rodrigo Abd, but it's so difficult. I know that. So there is a region in Peru's Amazon jungle called Madre de Dios, which means Mother of God in English. And there is a place in Mother of God called La Pampa. La Pampa is 10 times the size of Manhattan, and it's being destroyed by wildcat miners who work day and night looking for gold. Like the 49ers, you know that flooded into American West in the 1800s. Poor Peruvians have been struck with gold fever, but they share the same old dream that they can transform their lives digging in the ground. The best physical description of the place is that it looks like a landscape of war. Craters appear to have been caused by bombs. Thousands of trees are uprooted. People are constantly on the move, carrying machinery. It's really noisy. The jungle has been transformed in a huge, messy factory. The ecological damage is immense. But when I first started to think about the story, I thought only in an ecological story. And when I arrived there, and that's the good thing of being a photographer, that you need to be there, I thought also that it was a big social drama. It was not only about the damage of the jungle. You know, entire families living in makeshift camps with no running water, with rampant crime. And in the end, very few make money. The other thousands of miners only make money barely to eat. I read in Quechua an amazing story written by the New Yorker that in Peru's main indigenous language, that is Quechua, gold is sometimes referred as tears of the sun. I think it's a good definition. And you have probably read that Peru's economy is growing very well, and it's the new boom of the economy, and it's the first exporter of gold in Latin America, but the people still suffer, and I wanted to reflect that in my pictures. At the end, I want to thank the AP that gives me all this time to develop the stories that I think are important in Latin America. Thank you.
Abed. Okay. We now have the Lowell Thomas Award for Radio News, newly sponsored by Felice Levin in memory of Henry Levin. And it goes to Maureen Olivesi and Aaron Schachter of PRI The World for shining a spotlight on the ordinary people whose lives have been torn apart by extremism around the Middle East. Accepting the award is Maureen, who traveled from her home in Istanbul. We have a citation that goes to Emily Harris of NPR for War in Gaza.
So I started reporting in North Africa and the Middle East in 2011. First in Tunisia, then Libya, then Syria. And in all these countries, the excitement, the energy, the hope there, it was exhilarating. It was also contagious. And of course, it's an understatement to say things have gone downhill since. For veteran journalists like Deborah, those who had covered the war in Iraq and the war in Afghanistan, I guess the past 2-3 years have been mostly a throwback to the stories of repression, death, terror they were all too familiar with. But for younger journalists like myself, the adjustment was at times brutal. And it was even more brutal on scores of young people in the region whose lives were turned upside down. At first, it seemed for better, later on, all too often for worse. I spent most of the past year profiling some of them, activists, smugglers, artists, fighters. And I want to thank my editor, Aaron Schechter at The World, for his support and for valuing these stories. And I also want to thank all these people I've met along the way for sharing with me their hardships, their dreams, and everything in between. Thank you.
The David Kaplan Award for Best TV or Video News Spot, which is sponsored by ABC, takes us again to the Middle East. The reporting of Nick Schifrin, Phil Maravilla, and Ben Mulkey of Al Jazeera America distinguished themselves in a crowded field by risking their lives to give voice to the voiceless on both sides of the conflict in Gaza. Phil is here from Denver to accept the award, along with Nick, who brought a posse of friends and family. I also want to read a citation that goes to Emily Harris, Ahmed Abu Hamda, and Abu Bakr Bashir for NPR's Holy War.
Old friends. We spent 5 straight weeks in Gaza, and when I left Gaza, I went home to Jerusalem to a watch store owned by Jewish owners to fix my watch. And they asked me where I was from, and I said I was a journalist. And they said, well, have you been in Gaza? And I said, yes. And they said, tell us the truth. Tell us what really happened in Gaza. I got through about 6 words or so before they angrily interrupted me. All you reporters are the same. You're all pro-Hamas and anti-Israeli. Did you tell the truth? Did you say that those Palestinian mothers threw babies in front of our missiles? That's what they believed, that Palestinian mothers were throwing their children in front of Israeli missiles. Of course, it goes both ways. In Gaza, we met and interviewed a 9-year-old who'd survived 3 wars. We asked him, what do you think of Israel? He said that he'd never met an Israeli who wasn't wearing a uniform. He's 9. He said he hoped they all die and that he hoped Israel was wiped off the map. The opposite of war is not peace, it's humanity. It's understanding that people on the other side of a wall or a border love their children as much as you do. That's what David Kaplan believed. He and we share people's stories so our viewers or readers understand that humanity is not restricted by the location of our birth. We tried to tell stories whose characters produce empathy on both sides. Characters who produce understanding for us, an American audience, for that American woman sitting at a couch, hopefully saying, now I understand a little bit more about that person's motivations. And if one person watching our stories thought to themselves, maybe they are not that different from us, perhaps we succeeded. So on behalf of Phil and Ben, thank you to our families, our partners, Laura and Kim, for all of their support, Marcy McGinnis over there in the dark for being a rock and our journalistic guide before, during, and after Gaza, and especially Sami, Ami, Allah, Salah, Muhammad, the Israeli and Palestinian teams we work with throughout the war. Of course, this award would not be possible without them. Thank you very much.
The prestigious Edward R. Murrow Award is sponsored by CBS for the best television or video interpretation or documentary. This winning documentary unpacks a single oil deal in the Republic of Ghana, revealing a complex mix of politics, corruption, and greed. Accepting for POV, PBS, and American Documentary, Inc. is Rachel Boynton. And the citation goes to Marcella Gaviria of PBS Frontline and ProPublica for Firestone and the Warlord.
Hi. Well, I'm not a writer, so I don't have a very witty story written, but I do have thank yous that I want to say. First of all, thank you to the Overseas Press Club for honoring the film. To receive a film in Edward R. Murrow's honor is an incredible event in my life. Thank you to Simon Kilmurray, who couldn't be here tonight, Chris White, and the entire staff at POV, Impact Partners, Screen Pass Pictures, everybody who helped finance the film, everybody who agreed to be in the film, everybody who helped me make the film. You know, when I started this, I bought a plane ticket in 2006 to go to Lagos, Nigeria. And I didn't know anybody in the oil business, and I didn't know anybody in Africa. And the way I began was I sent out an email to the J School, Columbia J School listserv, saying, hey, anyone know anyone in Lagos? I'm going to Lagos. And that's how I started. And I got an email back saying, hey, yeah, I know this girl. She's great. She works for the AP. She lives in Lagos. And I called her up. Her name was Catherine Vreld. Thank you, Catherine. She introduced me to a community of international reporters in Nigeria who saved me. Not only did they open up their notebooks, not only did they help educate me about the weird politics of Nigeria, those of you who know the weird politics of Nigeria, but they saved me from boredom. They took me out for beer and pool, and they let me crash on their couches. So I wanted particularly tonight to thank them and to thank the larger community of international reporters who've been so incredibly supportive to my work. And also the local reporters on the ground, I have 8 seconds left, who have fought very hard in places like Nigeria and Ghana for transparency around issues of natural resource extraction. Very, very hard thing to do. Thank you, everybody, for this.
The Ed Cunningham Award is sponsored by the Ford Motor Company, and it's for the best international magazine reporting in print or online. And the winners are Matthew Akins and Sebastiano Tomada for the online magazine Matter. The judges said Akins' vivid characters offer a truly fresh window into the Syrian conflict, enriched by Tomada's quiet photographs. Matt, a Shell Fellow at the Nation Institute, and Sebastiano are both here to accept the award. The citation is to Patrick Radin Keith for The Hunt for El Chapo in the New Yorker magazine.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here.
Thanks, everyone.
This is a room full of people who know that behind every good story stands a great fixer. And so Seba and I wanted to shout out to our comrade, Salam Rezik, who got us in and out of Aleppo safely on what proved to be a much more difficult story than we had anticipated. Once we were back in Turkey, Salam's parting words to us were, "You're like brothers to us now. And when you go back to Syria, don't call me." We'd also like to thank our editor, Mike Benoit, and Matter for taking a chance and spending a lot of money on a risky story. Some of you might be wondering what the heck Medium/Matter is, and I'm not exactly sure myself. Medium is a new tech company, and Matter is its in-house online magazine. In any case, Mike, who had come from GQ and is now the Times Magazine, went for a story about Syrian characters, the incredible rescuers of Aleppo's civil defense, that other traditional publications had already passed on. They had rejected my pitch. And you've probably heard the refrain, you need to find an American character to tell this story. Well, there aren't any Americans in the Syrian civil defense. And, in fairness, these are commercial realities that we all have to deal with, but we aren't, I hope, helpless victims of our audience. And in fact, those audiences often surprise us, as I think they did with their response to the story. Moreover, we all need to ask ourselves whether the vastly different value given in press coverage to Western over non-Western lives not only reflects a drastic global inequality of power and violence, but also reproduces it. Does it reproduce that equality by heightening our recognition of certain kinds of violence against a Western life or a Christian life at the expense of our recognition of other kinds of violence against non-Western or Muslim lives? This is, I think, an especially apt question to ask about our response to ISIS and the wider violence in Iraq and Syria, where, to our collective shame, the war is entering its 5th year, and the brave members of Aleppo's civil defense continue to risk their lives so that others might live. Thank you.
The Thomas Nast Cartoon Award, and we need some brightness here, is awarded to Signe Wilkinson of the Philadelphia Daily News. This is the 4th time that Signe has won an OPC award, and tonight she's prepared a short presentation.
Thank you. Thank you. On behalf of beleaguered cartoonists everywhere, I'd like to thank OPC for honoring our little craft, particularly because many American newspapers have made themselves safe from a Charlie Hebdo attack by cleverly getting rid of their cartoonists. We're down from 150, maybe 35 years ago, to today's 40 or so full-time positions, plus a bunch of freelancers who can't afford the entrance fee for this contest. So the best thing journalism could do for OPC is to hire more cartoonists and run our cartoons. Where is Dean Baquet anyway? Oh. While I thank OPC for this award, I'm afraid they've made a terrible mistake. In the past few weeks, emotionally intelligent people, often in New York City zip codes, have said that cartoons should not punch down. Regrettably, your judges neglected to notice that many of my cartoons punch down. Take this reprehensible example of my work. If only we could wipe Israel off the map, our problems would be solved. Readers who sympathize with the Palestinian cause, however, said that they are the victims. Of course, when I've done cartoons about settlements and Gaza, Israeli sympathizers say they are victims. Even with nuclear weapons, they're victims. Then there's this one. No gays, no women, no birth control. Is the Pope Catholic? My readers say that making fun of people of faith, especially people of their own faith, is always punching down. But I hear you thinking, hey, she didn't draw a holy prophet. Well, earlier this month, I drew this. Wait, this isn't a gay wedding, is it? Friends, stop applauding. This is not funny. Many of my readers bitterly complained that Jesus has no place in an editorial cartoon. And my Jewish readers bitterly pointed out that I should have had unleavened bread. You can't please anyone in a cartoon. But what about drawing Mohammed? I have. And your utterly clueless judges honored it in the 2006 awards. The Big Fat Book of Offensive Religious Cartoons, Mohammed, third from the right. This cartoon has gone around the world many times with no complaints, which proves that it isn't showing a picture of Mohammed, but how you picture him. If he's laughing and happy, it's okay. My response to all religions is that if you don't want your prophet to appear in a nasty cartoon, don't do nasty things in the name of your prophet. Lastly, I'd like to say, especially in front of all you colleagues I'm in awe of and who get the stories that make it possible for a cartoonist to sit at home drinking coffee and do their job, that I am really well aware of my really privileged position cartooning in America under the protection of the First Amendment. So I will let a foreign cartoonist close for me. In 2011, opposition Syrian cartoonist Ali Ferzat was abducted by armed critics of his work who beat him and stomped his hands until they were broken. His first cartoon after that ordeal captures the spirit of great cartoonists everywhere. You applaud, but would you run it in your newspapers? And I leave you with the now controversial words of Charlie Hebdo: love stronger than hate. Thank you.
I think we know why she comes back every year. The Morton, the Morton Frank Award for Best International Business Reporting and Magazine, sponsored by Mark Lemke, goes to Cam Simpson and Jesse Westbrook of Bloomberg Business Week for tracing $100 million cash infusion from a Wall Street hedge fund that helped prop up Zimbabwe's brutal Robert Mugabe. Cam, who comes to us from London, is accepting his third OPC award. And there's a citation for William Langawasha of Vanity Fair for The Chaos Company.
Thank you all very much. I'm going to violate the first rule, which is we're not supposed to thank anyone. And I'm going to do that because, as Deborah said, I'm based in London. Jesse was based in London when we did this story. And for those of you not playing along back here at home, we have some really horrible libel laws in London. And when you're writing about billionaires doing business with Robert Mugabe's government in Zimbabwe, that is not a good thing. We still have a little thing called a prior restraint that they can get or threatened in the case of having endless resources to do that. So my editors, our editors, actually showed tremendous courage, even as we wobbled in the face of blistering threats from a billionaire and his lawyer. So thank you to my editors for having the courage to do this story. Greta Gregori, Bob Blau, Brian Erstad, Brad Wieners, and Josh Triangle. The only other thing I want to say is we're never going to escape the selfie era, at least not in the foreseeable future. But it is great, even as the selfie era permeates journalism, to be in a room with so many selfless journalists who do exactly the opposite of the selfie and turn the camera around and put it in the places where it really, really needs to be. And it's a great honor to be with you all. Thank you very much.
The Malcolm Forbes Award for Best International Business News, reporting in newspapers, news service, or online. It's sponsored by Forbes magazine, has been won by a Reuters team led by Stephen Gray for their series documenting how Russia's President Vladimir Putin and his billionaire friends control the Russian economy and siphon off billions of dollars for themselves. Here from London is Stephen Gray. The citation goes to the New York Times team of Joe Becker, Stephen Lee Myers, and Jim Yardley for Putin's Way.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. This was very much a team effort. There were 10 reporters involved. I won't name them all now, but please bear that in mind. But we do want to dedicate this award to a Russian colleague of ours who died very suddenly, our bureau chief in Pakistan, Maria Golovnina, who we love very much and who helped inspire us at the beginning of all this. Our breakthroughs here came largely from sort of turning over rocks that were scattered in plain sight. But there were also some fabulous and very candid characters that we met along the way that really showed that despite everything and some of what we've heard already, Russia can actually be a tremendously open place where there are fabulous stories to be discovered. I remember very much this Russian banker who survived an assassination attempt in Canary Wharf in London. But no one had asked him about his laptop of secrets, all the records of 2 Moscow banks that he'd brought with him and which we used to trace billions of dollars of state funds. We spent days and days knocking on doors in Moscow, talking to all the nominee directors and shareholders, mostly fake shareholders, who ran some of the contractors that extract billions from the Russian state. But I remember on a doorstep, a source finally being completely candid and saying, yes, I'm involved in running a vast money laundering operation. And finally, I remember a source passing a load of documents across a table in a wine bar, bank statements from Switzerland, showing how Russian federal health money was going via London, Liechtenstein, Switzerland, and then on to fund a palace, allegedly, for Putin in the Black Sea. Those were the memorable moments, and just really the point being made that Russia may seem a very forbidding place, and it can be dangerous for some people, but there is an incredible wealth of sources and openness in surprising places, and much more stones that I would encourage you all to go and turn over. Thank you very much.
Don't forget that. The Cornelius Ryan Book Award is sponsored by the Friends of Richard Threlkeld, and it goes to Evan Osnos for his book, Age of Ambition, Chasing Fortune, Truth, and Faith in the New China. It's published by Farrar, Straus, and Giroux. The book is a powerful look into the soul of China as 1.3 billion inhabitants clamor for economic and spiritual success after decades of deprivation. Here from Washington, accept his 3rd OPC award is Evan Osnos. The citation is awarded to Jack Fairweather for The Good War, Why We Couldn't Win the War or Peace in Afghanistan, published by Basic Books.
Thank you very much. It's a great privilege, I have to say, to be here tonight in the name of Cornelius Ryan and the values that he stood for. He was famous for writing 3 cinematic books about World War II. They made movies about them. They were a huge success. But what a lot of people don't know, I certainly didn't know until recently, is that he was a huge evangelist for the power of reporting over writing, for shoe leather over the pyrotechnics on the page. He told these great nonfiction tales, but what mattered to him most was that he had conducted, by his count, 16,000 interviews in the course of reporting his books. In a letter to a friend, he wrote, quote, "You may think this is all a kind of madness, an obsession, and I suppose it is," unquote. As foreign correspondents, we've often had the job of recording the memory that people in other countries are not permitted to record themselves. In many places, that means writing about war and dissent. And in China, where I've spent most of the last decade, it means also writing about the world's fastest accumulation of wealth. It's about who is winning and who's losing and who's setting the rules and who's breaking the rules and the tensions that that's creating for the future. Tonight, I'd like to acknowledge the enormously brave local journalists, Chinese journalists, who work under great pressure to report as aggressively as they can on wealth and power. But where we come in, as correspondents who enjoy the freedom to write what we know, we have a responsibility to do it, not only for our readers, but for the sake of reporters who don't enjoy the same privilege. So thank you to the New Yorker magazine and to Farrar Straus and Giroux for supporting this book, and to my wife, Sarah Beth, for supporting that and everything else.
The Madeleine Dane Ross Awards for Best International Reporting in the Print Medium or online showing a concern for the human condition, and it's sponsored by OPC member Linda Fasulo. And it's won by Jason Matlaw and the photographer Atish Saha of the Virginia Quarterly Review. They beat big name organizations with their story, The Ghost of Rana Plaza. This piece renders in heartbreaking detail the humanity of the victims who died as a result of a factory collapse in Dhaka, linking them all to us through the clothing that Bangladeshis produce. Our cheap jeans comes at the cost of their lives. Atish flew here from Bangladesh, and here from Oakland, California is Jason Matlaw. We have a citation, and that goes to Virginia Quarterly Review for Josh Hirsch's The Lessons of Atme.
Good evening, everyone. It's great to be here, and I'm going to say some thank yous. I want to thank the Overseas Press Club for this recognition. I've been freelancing for quite a long time now, and it's often very lonely work, made lonelier by the loss of good friends that we all know. But coming here has kind of been like a family reunion. I've seen a lot of friends and faces that I've missed, and it's great to be back together and celebrating the work that we do. I share this award with Atish Saha. He's come a long way from Dhaka, Bangladesh, to be here tonight. He's an extraordinary young photographer. You're going to be seeing a lot more from him. I returned to Bangladesh several months after Rana Plaza collapsed, and I was very lucky to meet him. He had worked the scene of the tragedy for 3 weeks, every day, day in and day out, pouring everything into his photographs. And for me, on first encounter, they were startling and personal, and they really challenged me to find the words to match. And I would encourage you to take a closer look at his photographs. We had, of course, a great team behind us that gave us the pages and the funds to tell this story the way we felt it needed to be told. At the Virginia Quarterly Review, big thanks to John Peedy, Allison Wright, and my editor, Paul Reyes, over here at Table 3, who did a lot of the heavy lifting on my story. And thank you for your care and patience. I'd like to thank my friends at the Pulitzer Center on Crisis Reporting, John Sawyer, Natalie Applewhite, who is here, Tom Hunley and the rest of the crew. They bet on me back when I was a real greenhorn, and they've been stalwart supporters ever since, so thank you. And finally, I'm going to call out Susie Taylor, who's my partner, girlfriend, and road warrior. She's over there at table 3. She's got a camera up, an orchid in the back of her hair. I made the decision to bring Susie with me to Bangladesh very early in our relationship, and that could have been a fatal decision. But she was relentless, and when I was frayed and fed up, she kept me going, and I really could not have finished this story without her. So thank you, Susie. I've been freelancing for quite a while now, and it's always been a grind. It's gotten tougher, as we all know. I want to close by saying I'm grateful to the editors and the organization, some of who are here right now, who are working behind the scenes to champion and sustain the work that we do. And to the journalists out there, freelance staff, whatever you may be, for their effort and inspiration, let's keep going. Thank you.
The David and Adelman and Patricia Teitler Award is sponsored by David and Pamela for the best international reporting in the broadcast medium, showing a concern for the human condition. And this year, it's a wonderful award won by Josh Fine and David Scott of HBO Sports with Brian Gumbel for the story, The Price of Glory, which spotlights abusive conditions, needless worker deaths, and the immense wealth that covers it up ahead of the 2022 World Cup in Qatar. The only other sports reporting team to win an OPC award was Sports Illustrated in 1964 for Olympic coverage, not the bathing suit issue. Congratulations, Josh and David. The citation goes to Terry Moran of ABC News Nightline for Moscow is Burning.
Thanks, this is really nice. 4 years ago, we started looking into Qatar's shocking, successful bid for the 2022 World Cup and wondered how FIFA could award the tournament to a stifling hot desert sheikhdom with an atrocious record of labor abuses. What we found was more than just a World Cup event, but a national sports plan of unprecedented ambition based on the exploitation of foreign labor, both on and off the field. Qatar's sports glory is built on the backs of hundreds of thousands of the poorest people on earth, imported and indentured to build a lavish World Cup city in the desert. It's a system used throughout much of the Gulf, something called kafala, in which migrant workers, who make up 90% of the population in Qatar, are bound to their employers who control where they work, where they live, and when or if they're allowed to go home. When the Qataris won the right to host the World Cup in 2010, they told the international community that they were going to change their labor practices. Very little, if anything, has changed. We want to thank the HBO brass, Richard Plepler, Ken Hirschman, Rick Bernstein for supporting Real Sports and giving us an opportunity to do stories like this. We're forever grateful. Our remarkable leader on Real Sports, Joe Persky, who is as responsible as anyone for us winning this award and always teaches us so much. Thank you, Joe. Brian Gumbel, who started this show 20 years ago and keeps steering it in the right direction. Brian, thank you. Our terrific editor, Stu Ash, Andy Boley for shooting our remarkable pictures, Tim Walker, Ken Clausen, and the Overseas Press Club for this magnificent award. Thank you very much.
The Joe and Lori Dine Award for Best International Reporting in Any Medium Dealing with Human Rights. It's sponsored by Philip Dine. And it goes to Samuel Black, Angela Kamat, and the Fault Line staff of Al Jazeera America. This film is another stunning example of what good journalism can do to expose labor abuses. The team traveled to India and the Middle East and uncovered irrefutable evidence about the exploitation of contract workers on U.S. military bases in Afghanistan. The citation Rahad Desai, Cynthia Kane, and Al Jazeera America presents staff for Al Jazeera America Presents Minors Shot Down.
Thank you so much for this award. It's a huge honor. I'm here on behalf of a wonderful and dedicated team that's behind this piece of journalism. Producer Sam Black, Director of Photography Rick Rowley, and our executive producer Matt Skeen, who's over on table 26, all of whom are here with me today, and also Associate Producer Nafisa Syed and Editor Warwick Mead, who are overseas. A special thanks to everyone who helped us on the ground in Afghanistan, India, and the United Arab Emirates. We made this film to highlight one of the many forgotten costs of America's wars in the Middle East and the toll it's taken on people we rarely think about in relation to these wars. Over 500,000 migrant workers, primarily from India, Nepal, and the Philippines, have labored for the US military in Iraq and Afghanistan, doing support work like cooking and cleaning. Privatizing these wars have made the companies that hired these workers billions of dollars on government contracts, but the workers themselves made very little. The convoluted supply chains of contemporary capitalism allowed contractors and subcontractors to maximize their profits, which is another way of saying that American tax dollars have paid for workers getting trafficked onto US bases. When we started working on the story, we didn't have very many leads, but Sam and Nafisa spent many, many months reaching out to hundreds of people who'd worked in US military contracts in Afghanistan in the hope that at least a few of them might respond. Finding those brave enough to speak with us wasn't easy. And telling a complicated story like this would not have been possible without the patient support of Matt Skeen, who gave us the time we needed to research and report this film from 3 different countries. We'd like to dedicate this award to all of the South Asian men who spoke to us at great personal risk. Thank you for recognizing their struggles.
The Whitman Basso Environmental Award, newly sponsored by Citi, goes to Nick Miroff of the Washington Post for a deeply reported series on the latest rush for resources across South America and the complex and often devastating impact they have accompanied the hunt for riches. Here from Havana via Mexico City is Nick, who says he assumes he's the only reporter in this room who works via dial-up internet.
It's a great thrill to be here tonight. I want you to all know I looked for a black bow tie in Havana, but the revolution does not offer tuxedo rental. I want to say a few words about our Washington Post colleague, Jason Rezaian, who's been locked up in Iran's Evin prison for the past 282 days. Jason is in jail for doing his job, the job that all of us do every day. And Washington Post executive editor Marty Barron, managing editor Kevin Merida, and foreign editor Doug Gell are here tonight. They've been working tirelessly to free Jason and end this nightmare for he and his family. Please show them your support and help us free Jason. I want to thank them for this, especially Doug, who encouraged me to do this series and signed off on expense reimbursements for items like mosquito netting and dirt bike rentals. Also, my editors, Will England and Tiffany Harness, the Pulitzer Center in Washington, and videographer Gabe Silverman, and most of all, my wife, Camila, who took care of the babies while I was running around in the jungle. And last, I need to thank Dominic Bracco, the amazingly talented photographer who's worked with me on this project and whose images I think you saw here. We had some great adventures together in Peru. We were surrounded by angry gold miners. In Bolivia, drilling crews wanted to take his camera away. But the thing I'll be most grateful to him forever for is the gear he brought to Ecuador. We were staying in a tiny Amazon village with an oil pipeline running through it and no water or electricity. The family hosting us had a little 2-room shack and 7 children, and Dominic and I slept head to toe on a dirty mattress on the floor. And biting flies and mosquitoes were swarming us as soon as the sun went down, but it was Dominic who had the foresight to bring a backpacking tent and one of those sleeping sacks, and they were the only things that shielded us from the giant cockroaches that started seeping out of the floor. This is for you too, my friend. Thank you, everyone.
The Robert Spears Benjamin Award, sponsored by Did Hunter in honor of her father, Lester Zifrin, for reporting on Latin America. And it goes to the Los Angeles Times team of Molly Hennessy-Fisk, Tracy Wilkinson, Kate Linthicum, Cindy Carcamo, and Don Bartoletti. The Times reporters and photographers gave a rich and complex picture of the surge of unaccompanied minors traveling from Mexico into South Texas, tracing their journey from Guatemala and Honduras up to the border. We have 4 members of the team who made it up to New York to accept the award, and our citation goes to Teresa Boo and Sinjeli Agnew of Al Jazeera America for Fault Lines, Mexico's vigilante state.
Hi, thank you so much for this award and for having us here. Our coverage of the immigration crisis last year involved a really noteworthy combination of many parts of the newspaper, combining Metro, national, foreign, photo, all brought together under the guidance of Kim Murphy, our editor. Molly, who is not with us tonight because she's in Nepal, wrote some of the earliest stories about what she was observing at the Texas border with Mexico, the surge in numbers, the moms she would see hiding in the bushes with their children and then turning themselves in to the Border Patrol agents. Cindy picked up on the story in Arizona, where the Border Patrol was literally dropping off families at Greyhound bus stations or sending them to increasingly congested and miserable detention centers. Kate found reunited families in Los Angeles. I went to Guatemala to find migrants who had been caught and sent back. And in southern Mexico, we were able to document Mexico's decision for the first time to intercept and deport Central Americans. And remarkably, Don Bartoletti, who is also not with us tonight, a photographer who, as it turns out, can also write, was able to go back and find a character who had been featured in the famous Enrique's Journey Pulitzer Prize winning project of 2003. And so he was able to go back and find the same person who sadly is now back in Central America, and his prospects for a better life destroyed. I just briefly want to pay homage to one person. A lot of Mexicans, oh, I'm already out of time. I was going to say that, they do try to help a lot of the Central Americans who come through. And one man who did it, who fed them, who got up every morning and fed the migrants who were passing through, he was also transgender, and he was murdered a couple of months ago. And we don't know why, because murders in Mexico were never solved. But there are people who do try to help. And these stories will continue to happen because of the horrific conditions of poverty and violence in Central America and the confusion of U.S. immigration policy. And hopefully the LA Times will be there to bring them to you. Thank you very much.
The award for Best Multimedia News Presentation is sponsored by Google. The judges called NPR's Borderland technically flawless, a simple idea but brilliant in approach and execution. This report tells the story of those who live in a world of human smuggling, drugs, and poverty. The report combined efforts of NPR radio reporters, web developers, data experts, producers, and photographers. Here from Washington to accept the award are Steve Inskeep and Kenaz Amaria. We have a citation. Wait, I'm certainly the one who wants to applaud. These are my guys. A citation goes to Peter Bocart and Marcus Bleasdale of Human Rights Watch for the unraveling journey through the Central African Republic crisis.
Good evening. Some of you may listen to NPR, and if you do, you're aware of Deborah Amos's reporting, and you know that sharing a stage with Deb is basically an award all by itself. Yeah. I just want to enjoy some of the ironies of this moment, that we are here accepting this visual award on behalf of our radio network, which is much, much more than a radio network. I also like the idea that we're receiving an Overseas Press Club Award for international reporting that was partly done in Texas. All right. And especially the irony that we went out to find the epic stories of ordinary people. We went the entire length of the US-Mexico border. We had a few interviews set up, but not very many at all. We went to find who we could find, people you couldn't easily call, email, or reach out to on Twitter. We ended up meeting people like Sarah, a woman who had crossed the US-Mexico border from Ethiopia, having traveled a dozen countries to get there. And we discovered there was an entire network of people smuggling people like Sarah around the world to the Mexican border. Kainaz's amazing images emphasized the human quality of these epic stories, often with very small objects, things like toothbrushes and toys, which people had left behind as they got across the border or were caught and their ambitions were frustrated. I do want to mention Nishant Dahia and Selena Simmons-Duffin, who accompany us in the vehicle. I want to thank my colleagues and managers at NPR for having the confidence to send us out, not to find the story that was expected, which is always a risk, that you just go for the story that's expected of you, but to find the story that is real, and the story that is always waiting for us. Thank you very much.
The Best Investigative Reporting Award is sponsored by Michael Serrell, and it's been won by C.J. Chivers of the New York Times for Secret Casualties. The series established a pattern of secrecy by the U.S. military for hiding from its own soldiers dangerous contaminations from chemical munitions. Here from his home in Rhode Island is C.J. Chivers, and we have a citation. It goes to Desmond Butler, Alberto Arch, Andrea Rodriguez, and Michael Weinstein of the Associated Press for America's Secret Cuban Twitter.
So it's always acutely humbling to be with a crowd like this one, and more so to win an award after seeing all the other work on the board and knowing what follows. And I'm going to break the first rule. I'm going to thank Michael Serrell for underwriting this award, because it gives me the chance for a brief Jeremiah that you're all going to have to suffer through. We thought we were working on a story about chemical weapons and old stocks that had been left behind from the Iran-Iraq war and that were wounding Iraqis and wounding American soldiers in very peculiar ways. It wasn't the biggest story in the world. It certainly was interesting. It was a chapter of the war that wasn't understood. We found, as we started to report it, that what we were really writing about was the perils of secrecy, the habits of secrecy under which our own government's doctors were not aware that our soldiers were being exposed to these weapons and were at times turning them away when they came for care. Soldiers going down roads in which previous chemical munitions had been used and explosive devices were not being told that happened. Soldiers who in some cases had to handle the weapons were not alerted that the weapons were out and about in the battlefield. As we reported it, we found repeatedly obstacles that our government was presenting for us. It included threats against sources to have their security clearances revoked. Merely mentioning the name, the title of certain chemical weapons records that we were seeking led for one colonel to be taken out of his office and have his computer zapped, because even the name of the document was considered to be beyond public discussion. I had other sources who were just, dressed down, told not to talk to me. This is a climate of fear and intimidation, and it's a habit of secrecy. And what it created really, and what everyone here I know stands against, and a lot of the work we've seen today and that we'll see in the future is about this, what it created was essentially a criminalization of discussing the truth, even by the people most affected by that truth. I worked for a place that let me for 2 years between all my trips overseas pick away at this until we found some brave people who were willing in an aggregate to come together and break the rules and tell the truth and talk about what happened. And this is really their award, it's not mine. It's the editors who let me patiently work on this, and it's the people who came forward and broke these rules. We like to think it's Uzbekistan that acts like that, but you're in a country that does too. Thank you.
The award for Best Commentary is sponsored by Robert Serro of Gibson, Dunn and Crutcher. The last award goes to Matthew Kaminsky for the work he did on Ukraine for the Wall Street Journal. Matt moved across Eurasia to view the same events from different points of view and offered beautifully written commentary that conveyed the urgency of unfolding history. He comes from Brussels, where he's just launched the European edition of Politico last week. And we have a citation, and it goes to Andrew Brown of the Wall Street Journal for China's World.
Thank you very much. I want to first thank Vladimir Putin for making me look smarter than I am, which may be not very hard, but it's the first weekend in March of last year when the little green men appeared in Crimea. I was supposed to go down with the rest of the pack, but I was a bit late, and by the time I was going to go, Russia closed the airspace in Crimea, so you couldn't get there, except on a 25-hour train ride. So I instead went to Donetsk, which was, nothing was going on there. And it was really haunting to come into Donetsk and realizing walking around Donetsk that no one was in charge. This was the most, one of the most Soviet working class cities, but there was no real separatist movement there at the time. But there was really no one in authority. And that weekend when I got there, there was a demonstration where suddenly, out of nowhere, 5,000 people appeared. And a lot of them seemed to have their clocks set 1 hour back onto Moscow time, because it turned out they had gotten bussed in from Rostov just across the border in Russia. And that was the prelude to a continuing and very horrible war. It is a war, even though a lot of us refuse to call it by that name. I no longer work for the Wall Street Journal, so I can now speak freely about my former colleagues. I want to thank most of all my colleagues at the Journal and Paul Jagot, who let one of his people spend months of last year hanging around in Russia and Ukraine and Europe. And I wouldn't work at Politico if I didn't put a plug in for Politico. We are now a global publication, and we are hiring. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, and thank you, Deb, and congratulations to all our winners. We'll give them one more round of applause, please. I met David Rowe 20 years ago when we were young reporters working in the Balkans. Shortly after that, I told the chief of correspondence at Newsweek magazine, where I worked at the time, that she had to hire him. He was the best reporter covering the Balkans, I told her. Not long after, David won the Pulitzer Prize for his part in documenting the massacre at Srebrenica. David's career has been extraordinary, including months of captivity in Afghanistan and Pakistan, a daring escape, and the book to tell about it. But he is not receiving a Lifetime Achievement Award from the OPC. He is still too young for that. David, come up, please. For a career fighting to expose ghastly injustice to the light, from Srebrenica to Afghanistan. For extraordinary courage and determination in the face of captivity. For an historic effort to craft a code of conduct for safely reporting global news. And for his compassion, humility, and humanity. David Stevenson Rhode is awarded the 2015 President's Award by the Overseas Press Club of America.
Thank you, Marcus, so much. First, I just want to thank you for saying this isn't a Lifetime Achievement Award. I was worried you knew something that I didn't about my future. I'm thrilled and honored to be here, and thank you all for your patience. I'm the last major speech you have tonight. Drinks will be served very soon. I'm kind of nervous. If we could just maybe play the cartoons again, that might be easier for all of us. My theme tonight that I want to talk about is what we can achieve together. I want to talk about these guidelines and explain what they are and what we're trying to do. I really believe today that we face an unprecedented challenge. At the same time, many news organizations are struggling with shrinking budgets. We as an industry must work together to innovate, to collaborate, to support each other. Together, as other speakers have said tonight, we must not allow governments, kidnappers, or criminals to intimidate us. I'm convinced we can emerge from this crisis even stronger if we work together. And one small example of that are the global safety principles and practices. That's a terrible name, and we want to admit it up front. We were, and I want to explain how this document came about and what we're trying to achieve. Our goal is not to force news organizations to sign on to some outsider's guidelines. Our goal is to force conversations inside news organizations. Those conversations can be private, they can be public, but we want editors and reporters, particularly freelancers, to talk about safety. This all started with first John Danishevsky, the foreign editor of AP, asked me to moderate a conversation at an AP and an IPI meeting in Chicago. And also at the same time, Steve Adler of Reuters invited me to a lunch. Both of those conversations were about safety. Both of those conversations were filled with fear about what had just happened in Syria and the death of James Foley and Stephen Sotloff. As we started this process, we tried to figure out how we could make things safer. What could we do? And then we contacted a group called the Frontline Freelance Register. They're based in London. They represent over 500 freelance journalists, many of whom cover conflict. And back to my theme of what we can do together, I found huge commonality between those editors and those freelancers. Yes, there was anger and frustration in terms of fees and what people were paid. There was distrust and concern about what was going on in these war zones and would we ever be able to cover them. But there was a huge sense of concern, both among freelancers and editors, that we needed to do more to help each other. The guidelines aren't perfect. They're essentially a bargain that was struck on one side between the Frontline Freelance Register and on the other, Reuters and AP. There's many people involved in this effort that were here tonight. I mentioned John Danishevsky already. Charlie Sennett, who's over here, the founder and executive director of the Ground Truth Project, helped us draft them. Emma Daly, a former foreign correspondent, helped as well. And Marcus Mabry, our president, helped us do this. There's an ugly secret here tonight. Marcus wanted to give himself the President's Award for the guidelines. But rather than remove him so quickly as president, I was chosen as a second choice. I also want to thank Bruce Shapiro, who's not here, from the Dart Center. If you want to see the guidelines, they're posted on the Dart Center website. And most of all, I want to thank my wife, Kristen Mulvihill. Many people know how incredible she's been and how she helped me 6 years ago when I was in captivity and how the New York Times did as well. In terms of the guidelines, they're fairly simple. There's 7 pledges for each side, freelancers making pledges and news organizations making pledges. For freelance journalists, they're encouraged when they go on dangerous assignments to be prepared and to be able to care for themselves and their colleagues if things go wrong. They're encouraged to take first aid classes and hazardous environment training. And they're urged to make careful risk assessments before traveling into dangerous areas and measure the journalistic value of an assignment against the risk. For news organizations, it encourages them and editors to show the same concern for the welfare of local journalists and freelancers that they do for staffers. It urges news organizations to be aware of and factor in the additional costs of training, insurance, and safety equipment in war zones for freelancers. It also urges organizations and editors to not make an assignment with a freelancer in a conflict zone or dangerous environment unless the news organization is prepared to take the same responsibility for a freelancer's well-being in the event of a kidnap or injury as it would a staffer. We're all amazed by this event. We never thought we could even agree on common language, the half dozen of us that drafted it, let alone get people to sign on. What's amazing to us is that since we unveiled the guidelines in an event at the Dart Center at the Columbia Journalism School in February, the number of signatories has tripled from roughly 20 to 60. 5 of the world's largest news organizations have signed on to the guidelines: AFP, AP, Bloomberg, the BBC, and Reuters. Every major journalism group has endorsed them as well. I won't try to name all these groups, and there's really only one journalism group that matters tonight, and that's the Overseas Press Club. Thank you, Marcus, for signing on. Volunteers have translated the call into 5 languages: Arabic, French, Hebrew, Persian, Spanish, and Turkish. But what amazes me most is the response around the world. Local journalists' unions and associations from 10 countries who we didn't even reach out to have signed on to this. Just last week, a journalist group in Mexico and another one in Iraq signed on. We also have signatories from the Philippines, Belarus, Kazakhstan, Albania, and Argentina. In short, they're showing tremendous courage. But my goal tonight, and our goal, is not to pressure news organizations to sign on. We know that these decisions take a long time. And the goal is not even to have news organizations sign on. I've been told by editors in this room that they're not going to sign on, that they want to keep their internal procedures private, and that's absolutely fine. But they would thank me for giving them an excuse to start an internal conversation about safety and how editors and freelancers together can work together to do the reporting that's so important. Thank you. Our goal is honest conversations between freelancers and editors, blunt conversations between freelancers and editors before an assignment about what a news organization will do and won't do if things go wrong. No one believed that freelancers and news organizations could reach this kind of agreement. No one believed that Reuters and AP could actually work together. But we did it, and we all will work together. We'll talk together about the incredible challenges we face, and we'll find ways to do the reporting we must. Every news organization in this room has suffered a tragedy. Every journalist in this room has lost a friend or nearly lost a friend in the last 2 years. We owe it to the ones we've lost. To name a few, Jim, Steve, Luke, and Kenji. We owe it to Jason as he sits in captivity, and the other honorees that we've mentioned tonight to not give up. Together, we can stop governments from stilling our voices. Together, we can stop the rich, the corrupt, and the criminal from intimidating us. Together, we can stop censors from squelching our stories. Together, we will do the reporting we must. Together, we will meet the challenge of our times. And together, we will not be silenced. Thank you all so much.
And the question I got most tonight was like, really, David Rode? See, there's a reason I gave it to him. Each year at the OPC dinner, we honor our comrades, those who have fallen or who are in captivity. This year of challenge and tragedy is particularly poignant. Kathy Gannon was injured in a shooting on April 4th, 2014 in eastern Afghanistan while covering preparations for that country's presidential elections for the AP with photographer Anya Niedringhaus. A police commander walked up to their car and opened fire with an AK-47. Niedringhaus died and Kathy was injured. She has undergone 20 operations. Kathy is special regional correspondent for Pakistan and Afghanistan for the AP. She has written a book, I is for Infidel, From Holy War to Holy Terror in Afghanistan. We are honored to welcome OPC member Kathy Gannon to light the candle of concern. Kathy.
Words seem so insignificant when it comes to praising the commitment of those of our colleagues who have paid with their lives to get the story, the photograph, and the video. For those of us injured doing our job, we have, I think, gained strength from those we lost, but also from our real belief in the value of what we do. I am so honored to have been asked to light this candle. I do it for my friend Anya and for all of those who are no longer with us. I do it as a symbol of how bright your collective legacies shine, and for those of us whose injuries I hope will inspire us to keep working and refuse to even entertain the word defeat. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kathy, and thank you all for attending this 76th OPC Annual Gala. And thank you, Daimler, for sponsoring our Meet the Winners drinks reception right now in the back of this room. Please join us, and please, before you do, fill out those donation cards on your table. Good night, and as we used to say at Newsweek magazine, the bar is open.